wanted to talk to everybody. Welcome to July, everybody. Wanted to talk to you, Dustin, about some Westerns.
Yeah.
We had a semi-Western kick, and then we did stuff that came across, doesn't sound right, came across our laps, and we decided, hey, we got a couple more Westerns
yeah, exactly.
on the docket. So let's get into those now that we have seen them.
Let's do it.
I want to start first with Open Range.
Okay.
Beautiful country. Man can get lost out here. Forget there's people and things that ain't so simple as this. How long we been riding together, Charlie?
Nigh on 10 years.
Mm-hmm. You know what they call that? Call it a decade.
I always hoped somebody gentle and caring might come along.
I'm not who you think I am, Sue.
My name's Denton Baxter. You know, folks around these parts don't take to free grazers.
Always been country plenty for man and beast.
Times change, Mr. Spearman.
Most time a man will tell you his bad intentions if you listen. Let yourself hear it. You reckon them cows worth getting killed over?
Cows is one thing, but one man telling another man where he can go in this country is something else. The lawman who sat in that jailhouse sort of sneering sticks in my craw.
Whole town knows there's a fight coming. They just hope it don't spill over to them.
Baxter's men bushwhacked our friend, shot him dead, shot a 16-year-old boy too, and clubbed him so hard he might not live.
I got no problem with killing boss. Never have. Men are gonna get killed here today, Sue. And I'm gonna kill them.
A man's got a right to protect his property and his life, and we ain't letting no rancher or his lawman take either.
I want you to know that if I don't ever see you again, that I meant everything I said to you. And I appreciate everything you said to me.
You should have run when you had the chance, Spearman.
You're the one who killed our friend.
That's right.
Get out of this house!
You may not know this, but there's things that gnaw at a man worse than dying.
So Open Range made my list to watch because it was released 20 years ago. So that's notable, as you might know if you listen to this show. What would also be notable is if I Googled things and had them ready before I started talking. Open Range, I even remember in 2003, it was like a big deal. I was like, oh, Kevin Costner directing this movie. And even then I was like, oh, that's cool. He's not a director. Kevin Costner did in fact direct this film, and he stars in it with Robert Duvall. You've also got Annette Bening and Michael Gambon in here. And with a screenplay by Craig Storper. And it's a Western. It's called a revisionist Western on Wikipedia. Which I never heard of that. Designated post-classical variation of the traditional Western. The revisionist subverts the myth and romance of the traditional by means of character development and realism to present a less simplistic view of life in the Old West. I would say this movie kind of does that.
Maybe
it's not that subversive, you know. It might depict. There might be a little bit more verisimilitude, like maybe more accurate use of weapons and things like that. But it's not revisionist or subversive. It is pretty romanticized actually. Yeah. So the movie is Robert Duvall and Kevin Costner are a couple of open range cattlemen. Sorry, not open rangers. That sounds like a wife swap for like a
for cowboys.
For any ranger, Texas Ranger,
right? Yeah, sure.
Park Ranger,
Texas Ranger.
Yeah, if you're a ranger, put your keys in the jar and have a good time.
There you go.
Sorry. If web series weren't like so played out, that should have been something we did, Dustin.
Okay.
That's a no. That was a polite no.
That was a polite no. That was okay.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
So So there are a couple of open range cattlemen, as opposed to people who like own property and, ranch that. And they're out there living, the idyllic existence, just kind of roaming around with their cattle and their horses and their little friend Diego Luna and and their big friend. I don't even know which actor plays Mose. But anyway, there's just 4 people out there, and it's the life is good, right? Life is fine, everything's good, their needs are met, and
Abraham Ben Ruby.
Okay,
is his name.
And so, something happens to one of their men, and the responsible party is in this nearby town. By the way, it's 1882. Sorry. And
it's 2002.
They drive there in their Tacoma.
Their Prius.
Yeah. And so you quickly meet Michael Gambon, who's like this, he owns the town. He's just this very wealthy guy, and he's sort of, he's got the sheriff, the local marshal bent to him. Everyone in town's afraid of him. It's his town, and he does not like open range cattlemen. And he essentially admits, like, yeah, I fucked up your guy because I don't like you. Go away.
Yeah.
And Robert Duvall's like, no. Mm-hmm. And conflict ensues.
Right.
And so anyway, I used to own open range. I bought it on a whim when I was 17 or something, and then it was stolen from me by a Delta employee. So I don't know if I think I saw open range once. But I was interested because the trailer made like big use of Kevin Costner doing the thing where you pull the hammer back on the Colt and you can fire it faster. I was like, oh my God, is that even real? Is that a thing you can do?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was aware of the movie, and I knew that it seemed like it was considered solid by anyone who'd seen it. But I've not watched it as an adult until this viewing.
Until now.
And I would say that I enjoyed it. I was surprised the movie opens and it's like Touchstone Pictures. And I was like, oh my God, this is
a Touchstone.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. It's 2003. That was still around.
Yeah.
But I thought that the pace was really good for this movie. I'm usually afraid that there is going to be too much lingering with Westerns, especially more modern Westerns, because it's like, oh my God, like let's pay tribute to the Old West and show you lots of landscapes, but not like advance the story at all. And this movie wasn't too slow. It progressed pretty well, and I thought it was well directed on all counts. But there's other stuff I got. But what did you think of it, Dustin?
I thought it was pretty good. I thought it's sort of a classic Western. So I'm not sure I fully agree with the idea that it's a revisionist, but I do think that, it's just a more modern take in terms of violence, but everything else plays like a classic Western to me. Yeah. It's romanticized. It's, kind of a straightforward story. There's not a lot of twists and turns, and it just kind of plays out the way you'd expect it to. And not in a bad way, but that's kind of how the Westerns go. And yeah, but it's just more violent than your typical, like John Ford, John Wayne picture. So to that end, sure, revisionist, fine. But I wouldn't even consider that revisionist. I just consider that a modern take on a classic formula, because audience sensibilities have changed, right? So to me, this is like, okay, so by the time this film came out, films in general were more violent and had more gore to them. And they were just a little more visceral and brutal. And so you just took what we were used to and just did the things that you can do now without, like pushing people away. And I think that the Western, we tend to think back on the Western through our modern lens and say like, oh, look how like quaint and whatever it was. But you have to remember, a lot of Westerns that we now consider really tame were once considered really brutal. and really frightening. And so it's like a weird evolution of it, where now we're looking at it and going, yeah, this is a little more brutal than your typical Western. But in another 50 years, they're probably going to look back at this and say, look how tame this was. And so, it's just the way that storytelling evolves. But I thought it was good. I thought Kevin Costner does a really good job acting. The direction, I think, was interesting to me, and maybe this is more in the editing, but there's some, I would say, an overuse of like cross dissolve to the point where I was starting to get confused, because typically a cross dissolve would denote a passage of time.
Yeah, time has passed.
And I feel like it was being used not that way here.
They'll go from like a close up of Kevin Costner talking while they're about to go to sleep, cross dissolve to like a wide of their camp, and you're like, oh, is this like the next night? And then he just says the next thing, and you're like, wait,
we're still here.
Stop it.
So there's stuff like that I think is whatever. But the truth is, like, all that aside, that can also just be a stylistic choice. It doesn't necessarily mean bad direction. So I'm not going to say Kevin Costner did a poor job here. I think he did fine, and he certainly knows how to work with actors. He got great performances from Michael Gambon and from Robert Duvall, and so I give him credit for that, as well as just how difficult it is to direct something you're also starring in, and I would imagine. I've never done it. But that's my little disclaimer. But yeah, I mean, it's a good little movie. I don't think it was groundbreaking. I don't think it stands up with a lot of your classic Westerns like The Searchers or Stagecoach. It doesn't quite hit that level for me of like the mythic West. But it is a good movie, and it's certainly not a slow slog of a movie, which, it totally could have been. It's a longer film. It's upwards of 2 hours, but it doesn't really feel it. And so, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good little throwback. I don't think Hollywood would make something as simple as this today. I think that it would be something a little more, it would be a little more subversive, a little more revisionist. But I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think I gave it 3.5 stars.
Yeah. And what it is a very clear passion project for Kevin Costner, because, directed by him, produced by him, starring him. And it's based on a book, The Open Range Man by Lauren Payne. And, without even reading the history of this, I can tell you that like, that all would suggest to me that usually when you're a producer on a project, like if you're an actor and you're producing a project that you end up starring in or you're heavily creatively involved in, it's because you're looking for, that's part of how you get movies made that allow you to take control of your career. I was watching an Actors on Actors today with Elle Fanning and Jenna Ortega, and they were talking about why they both started producing like on their shows. Like I think Elle Fanning's a producer on that show, The Great, which my wife is watching right now. She loves it. And then Jenna Ortega is going to be producing this next season of Wednesday. And Elle Fanning said for her, it was, an up and down of being an actor is that the industry and other people can kind of just decide what your career is going to be and what you can and can't play. And producing is one way you can go, oh, now I'm going to like look for projects and I will develop them myself and get them made. And so that's just fresh in my mind. And here we are talking about Open Range, which we've been planning to talk about for like 2 weeks. And that angle just popped in my head just now. But so if you're watching Open Range, you're essentially watching what is the end deliverable of Kevin Costner saying, I want to make a Western.
Yep.
And this is what it is. I mean, the guy clearly loves Montana. I think doesn't Yellowstone take place in Montana? I mean, like,
I think so.
Yeah. So Kevin Costner loves Montana. He loves the Old West. He wants to dress up like a cowboy, and he did a good job, and he made a solid movie. Yeah. The only thing for me that like was a misstep here, and that's more of a nitpick than anything else. It's just, I think that the middle act was dragging a little bit because there are time, and to be fair to Kevin Costner and to the screenwriter, what was the show I just watched? Godless had the same problem, where there's not a lot of threat, I feel, from the bad guys in the middle of the story. They're bad when you introduce them, and then they're just kind of in specs. There were times here where I'm like, I can't believe they're able just to go to Annette Bening's house and they're not harassed by all these people in town. Don't they know that their friend is like convalescing there?
Yeah.
Like if I were the bad guy, that's where I would go, and I would point a rifle at Annette Bening and be like, you need to move aside or I'm going to blow your head off because these men aren't welcome here.
Right.
So anytime they were there, I was like, what is this, like tag? Like, is this like a free zone?
Right.
It's like Switzerland.
It's true. I mean, I think there's one of two ways that you write this. You either write it where the hero and the villain don't really meet up until the end.
Yeah.
And then you do it where they are continually meeting up throughout the film. They went with the second way. I mean, in a weird sense, like Michael Gambon disappears from this movie for the entirety of the second act.
Yeah. Yeah.
His henchmen are there,
right,
but he himself does not show back up until the climax. And that's such a strange choice. It reminds me of like Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where Kirk and Khan don't actually ever, meet up throughout the film. Like they're talking to one another, but they're not in physical presence with one another. And so they kind of went that route here, but it didn't quite work because you always felt like things were just okay. Yeah. Right. And like occasionally we'll bump into somebody that's going to cause us a problem. But, theoretically there would be, the town's totally livable. You know what I mean? It's just every now and then you're going to have a tussle.
Kevin Costner has a dream where like those men are like in her house about to shoot him. And it's like a dream. But before I realized it was a dream, I was like, oh, okay, good. They are there. They broke into her house. They're going to try to kill him.
Yep.
And then it's just like a horrible war dream. It's like, man,
I almost wish they had developed that more and like had Kevin Costner, with like, I don't want to say PTSD, but some sort of like the specter of these villains kind of hanging around, which would cause him to do something that instigates something, or he makes a mistake because of it. Yeah. He almost harms Annette Bening because of it. Yeah. Like, go the extra mile. Let him hurt her. And that's there's good storytelling potential there that maybe the villain is in internal villain and not necessarily an external villain. And then your film kind of becomes about something more, internally, psychologically. But the film just kind of sticks to, I'm the big bad sheriff and I'm gonna run you out of this town, fella. Yeah. Yeah.
But that ending shootout is worth it. And just like in Godless, you've got this big, long shootout where a lot of cool things happen. And that's really well directed. Like him, like just shot choices, like where's the other three that the guy, the what's his face, the guy who the clown who tries to steal Air Bud, that actor, he's the guy up in the barn and he's like helping them and he counts like 8 people and Kevin Costner looks and you can see the 3 shadows of the other guys and just stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that's just nonverbal storytelling, geography. And then, our protagonist being smart. Like I can't stand it in movies when people get snuck up on because I'm just like, I hate it so much. It's the worst thing.
Especially when they like add the Foley of like,
it's like, of them walking up. Clearly he's over there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You can hear things with your ears.
And I also just thought that Annette Bening was just fetching in this film. I thought that she was perfectly like, Jesus Christ.
Whatever that was, didn't agree.
It was a smoke detector.
Oh.
So like anyway, I thought Annette Bening was great in the film too.
Yeah, I agree. I think she had good chemistry with Kevin Costner and you get like this weird boyish thing from him and this like conservative dignified woman that isn't going to just hand herself out to the first guy that comes through. And yeah, it's it's a good dynamic, that the two of them have, and they have good chemistry. So that sells it. For me, the best part of the film is watching Robert Duvall and Kevin Costner be, friends and, buddies. Like that to me is the best part.
They have a cute little friendship, and there's a nice ongoing like little thread of Kevin Costner's like crush basically on Annette Bening, and Robert Duvall picking up on it instantly and constantly just being sort of nosy about it. Like, what are you looking at? And he's got like the catalog with like the tea set, and he's like, and they're about to leave, and he's like, you need to go talk to her. Like just little stuff like that. Where it's just like, it's like in grade school. Like, go talk to that girl, man. Like,
right. Exactly.
Go talk to her. We may not be back. Anyway, that's Open Range. That's on Amazon Prime if anybody wants to check it out. All right. The main event now, what I'm really here to talk about.
Yes.
Is Bone Tomahawk.
Bone Tomahawk.
You want me to change out the batteries?
Good evening. In civilized towns, you look a man direct in the face when you talk to him.
This isn't comfortable.
Well, it's not supposed to be.
There's a situation. Serious.
Mrs. O'Dwyer was abducted.
She is my everything, and those savages have got her. God knows what they're doing to her, and every second that we delay.
You know who did this?
I don't have a name.
How many of them do you think there are?
It won't matter. You have no chance against any number of them.
I'm coming with you.
No, I need you here.
And this is what the backup's for, to help an emergency, not stay back. I'm coming.
We're making a 5-day journey in 3 days, riding along and sleeping the bare minimum.
I don't know what's west of here. No cattle trail or anything else goes in that direction.
If our horses die before we get there, or we go into hostile territory, weak and foggy with exhaustion, we won't rescue anybody.
Don't be scared. I am a friend.
You aren't.
Damn you! You had no cause. If you want to question my morals, do it later.
All right, so Bone Tomahawk. Oh my God, that's a different alarm. Sorry, Tara, will you tell Noah he has 15 minutes left on his tablet? All right, so Bone Tomahawk was directed and written by S. Craig Zoller, starring Kurt Russell, Patrick Wilson, Matthew Fox, and it's also a Western, but it's not a Western like Open Range at all.
I would venture to say it's a horror movie with a Western veneer.
Yes, the Wikipedia has it as a Western horror film. And this film is essentially about a group of people on a mission to recover a couple of their townspeople who were taken by savages.
Yes.
And messed up things ensue.
Yes.
Where did you hear about Bone Tomahawk? When did you first become aware of Bone Tomahawk?
I remember when it came out.
Okay.
I did not see it, but it was one that I was like, oh, I'm interested in this.
Sure.
I didn't know it was a horror thing. I just saw Kurt Russell and said like, ooh, I want to see this. And I just never saw it. And then I think Red Letter Media did a review of it.
They did.
And then I was like, oh, it's a horror movie. And then I was like, I have to see this now.
Yeah.
And so, and then I just never saw it. And then I think you brought it up and I was like, oh, I will watch this then.
I can't remember. And I don't remember why I watched it, because I was aware of Bone Tomahawk. I just remember that I saw the poster with Kurt Russell. And then I think I'd heard someone casually say that they liked it, something, I don't know. And then Red Letter Media came out with their video, which was like a year or two ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. And so I had watched that and I rewatched it after seeing it. And I didn't remember that, you shouldn't watch it if you hadn't seen the film, but I didn't remember plot. My brain did a good thing. It forgot all the plot details from that video. And it just remembered that it was recommended, that it was something worth checking out.
That's all we need to know.
And so all I remembered about it was Bone Tomahawk is violent, but it's good.
Yes.
And so I didn't know there was horror elements either. The movie begins with someone getting their throat slit with a dull blade. And so I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And then the person who's doing it pans up and we had just watched all the Scream movies. It's David Arquette.
It's David Arquette.
And right off the bat, I realized I liked the script. And And I like it because it's not too period appropriate, and therefore hard for the general moviegoer to follow. Sometimes you get scripts where it's just like, okay, clearly the person did a bunch of research, but I can't latch on to any of this.
Yeah.
But it's also not like super contemporary and therefore anachronistic.
Sure.
Like people talk pretty close to how we might talk.
Yep.
But still like with word choices that are not quite modern.
Yeah.
And I thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
I thought the writing was perfect. And I'd never watched and there's a little bit of, there's obviously an intentional comedy angle here in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't think I can think of another Western made these days or ever where I go, oh my God, I enjoyed this script. I just really enjoyed the characters and the writing.
Yeah, that's what stuck out to me too. I thought that the characters were well developed. Like I had a clear sense very early on who they were, what they stood for, what their like worldview was. Like I had a very good idea of how Matthew Fox was different than Kurt Russell, and
very
well, and so I had that reaction. Like, I like these characters. As far as the dialogue goes, it's like almost theatrical sometimes.
Yeah.
Like like you said, it is both contemporary and of its time.
Yeah.
But it never feels wrong. It never feels wrong coming out of their mouths. And to me, like, that's a huge success. I wrote a Western in college.
Yes.
And researching the vernacular of the day was both a really good thing and a really bad thing, because I felt like if I stuck too close to the way people actually talked, it would hinder the audience from being able to latch on or understand what I mean. Because some of the word choices, like some of the words they used, have completely different meanings now than they did then. Yeah. And so it's like that, how accurate do I need to be? And I felt like this film hit that perfect balance of feeling accurate, feeling contemporary, feeling heightened, and all of the above. And I enjoyed that a lot. So I also loved this script.
I thought that the pace was really good. It's very fast. The conflict is pretty immediate, and it's very clear in every scene what we're doing. The story is simple. We're not following multiple groups of people and having to interweave a plot. We're following three or four people on a rescue mission. I think the movie really is great, especially once you get to the troglodytes and you start introducing their terrifying roars, and it's really, really engaging. And even when no action is happening, it's just, I loved it. Like it was, I just sat, even after like a few scenes, I was like, I think I love this. And halfway through, I was like, this is great. Like, I was really enjoying this movie. I would probably give it like a 4.5 or something. Like I just really enjoyed it. And I love everyone gets cool moments. And, like I said, it gets really violent. There's a particular scene where something terrible happens to, well, I don't want to say like terrible happens to a character, but there's a very violent death that occurs, and it's awful. And it just makes the movie so good.
Yeah, agreed. That moment may be the most brutal thing I've ever seen on film. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't watch a ton of horror movies.
No, but it feels that way though. It feels,
but it just, it feels brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe like in terms of gore and violence, I mean, it's up there, but just that unsettling feeling of like watching what happens happen.
Yeah.
It'll stick with you, man.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I watched this before Open Range, so I went into Open Range feeling like
I did
uneasy, and I was like, oh no, what's gonna happen? And I'm like, oh wait, that was the other movie. Yeah.
The enemies are just men, just horrible men. That's all.
Yes. Correct. But yeah, I also had this moment, I guess it was probably like approaching the third act, where I was like, I think I love this movie.
Yeah.
Like I think this is a fantastic movie. And I will say, by the end, I felt a little less enthusiastic than I did at that third act mark. I think that it doesn't end the way that I would like for it to. And I always hate to knock that against a film, but like, I do think that there are loose threads. There are some things, some missteps in the way that the story is presented. And we can talk about that in a minute. I love this movie. I gave it 4 stars. I love this movie. It's just the ending. It's just literally the last few minutes that I have issues with.
I really thought that it was a good turn for Matthew Fox also, who like is seemingly like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he just if he just isn't getting good offers after Lost, if he just is not interested in any roles with more visibility after Lost. I don't know what it is, but like even from Speed Racer, you know, I remember all of us like really liking him as Racer X. We're like, he's great. Like, and it's just this like underappreciated like turn in these movies. And in this film, he's just so good as like this self-described smartest man in the group. He's all his shit's real tight. You know, he's just, everything's together. He's got it all figured out. He dresses real nice. He's smart. He's got this really awesome telescope that he won't let anyone use because it's from Germany, and it's really nice, and no one else can appreciate that. I love that guy. I was like, I love this character existing in the Old West. Like he's ahead of his time. He has to live in this dirty, grimy, you know, lawless age, and he's a civilized, enlightened, intelligent man. You know, who I think Matthew Fox is way better than people give him credit for.
Yes. And I think part of that is like by the end of Lost, a lot of people had soured on it. A lot of people, I think, kind of felt like Jack was not as promising at the end as he was at the beginning. Okay, sure, whatever. It's debatable, but I think that's in the writing. I don't think that's in Matthew Fox's performance. And because I don't think his performance got worse over time. I think the way that the audience connected with the show got worse over time. And so I've always felt like he's underappreciated. And yeah, maybe it's just after that experience, he's like, you know what, I'm kind of done with the big movie thing. And if he settles into being like a character actor who shows up every so often in something that I love and nails it, be it. Yeah. Cause he nailed it here. And there's a moment towards the end with him that I was just like, this is such a great piece of writing for this character. And it's delivered perfectly by Matthew Fox. And I think he kind of stole the show for me a little bit.
Yeah, he does.
He's just such a good character and it's such a good performance. Yeah. But that's not to knock the other performances because they're all great.
Oh yeah. Kurt Russell's great in this movie. Richard Jenkins, this is the most I've seen him disappear into a character.
Yeah, totally.
Probably. Yeah, he's really great. Just this nonstop talking, you know.
Yep.
And
playing
deputy.
Way older than he is.
Yeah. I had a little bit of trouble seeing him that old because I don't want to think about Richard Jenkins dying.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Yep. And Patrick Wilson does a great job.
Patrick Wilson, he's another actor who's unappreciated. So that guy, for as long, I don't remember when he first came to prominence, but the earliest film I can remember Patrick Wilson in is The Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
And he's great in that movie. He sings. Yeah. His acting is great. And I don't think he's ever been nominated for an award for his acting. And
no, but he's good. He's great. Got a charisma and like.
I love Patrick Wilson.
I do too. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the first time I saw him. And then of course, Watchmen and moving on to the Conjuring series and Aquaman and whatever. So like, he's been around, right? He's in a bunch of stuff.
Wasn't he in Lakeview Terrace?
Lakeview Terrace. Yes. Yep. He's in Lakeview Terrace with Zoe Saldana. And he's just always been there. Yeah. But yeah, no one really like talks about him, and he's good, and he's really good in this role.
Yeah. Man.
I do want to talk about the very end.
Okay.
So if we can put a tag on,
if you've not seen Bone Tomahawk, you really should see it. It's fantastic. And it's currently, I don't know where it is right now. Where did I see this?
On Tubi.
It's on Tubi. Okay. Was it somewhere else when I first watched it? Go check it out right now. You can do it. No strings attached.
That's right. Totally free. Just a few ads.
Can I say real quick about the ending just to ease us in?
Yes.
I really love I really love Kurt Russell's final piece of dialogue.
I agree.
Say hello to your wife, or say hello to my wife.
Say goodbye to my wife.
Yeah,
I'll say hello to yours.
I was like, oh, it's so good.
It's a really good line, and that's what I mean by things feeling a little theatrical.
Yeah,
like the dialogue, like that's very heightened. Like no one really talks that way.
That's movie
but
dialogue.
That's a really good line.
Yeah.
I love the ending. I think the ending is fantastic. That third act is great.
Yeah.
And from the moment they get into the troglodyte cave, it's like engaging and then of course watching like Patrick Wilson fight his way in is
that's
engaging.
One of the best things is just like you might assume that once they leave him out there to after he's been knocked out and they've set his leg, that's it. He's just going to die. Like we'll never see the character again. We won't know what happened to him. They'll come back after they save his wife maybe, and his body will be gone and you won't know what happened.
Yeah.
You know, but the guy just like hobbles along and ends up saving everyone's lives, just slowly picking off and making smart choices. Like he sees the cave and he essentially says, well, that's a little obvious. I'm not going to just walk in the front door.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And he knows to steal the vocalizer thing.
The neck piece.
Yep.
The neck whistle.
Yes. Yeah, right. Smart character, great choices. Totally on board with him. What I buck up against is two things. One, I feel like the film ends. Well, before I get there, I feel like Kurt Russell making his last stand with, there's three troglodytes left and we hear 3 shots. That and Richard Jenkins puts the rock down that he was going to use to defend himself. It's like I trust him.
Yeah.
He's done it. The 3 are dead. I would like to have seen that happen. I understand the artistic reason that they didn't show it. But to me, it leaves everything feeling uneasy. And obviously this is not a franchise film, so I'm not expecting a sequel. So to me, it feels as if we've ended the film in a way that leaves room for a sequel that'll never happen.
Sure.
Or to me, the biggest thing was obviously saving the people, but then the secondary goal of that is we've got to kill these troglodytes. Like they have to be done. And I think leaving it up to our imagination to assume that it's been done is not as satisfying as it could have been.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen the film continue. You hear the 3 shots, and then there's one final encounter with one really mean, troglodyte who's got a bullet in his shoulder, and he's the last survivor, right? And that to me would have been. And then if they then kill him, then it's like, I can breathe, but I don't feel like I can breathe at the end of the film. To me, I feel like we're still waiting, and then the movie just ends. And so that dovetails into my second thing is the movie just ends.
Yeah.
And I have this thing where I don't like when films end when okay, we've completed the story. Great. But what does that now do for our characters? Right? It's not enough to have the goal completed. We have to know how this affects our characters. And maybe this comes from, the fact that I'm so attached to the Lord of the Rings, but you have so much at the end of the Lord of the Rings after Sauron is defeated that you get a sense of like where these characters are going and what their headspace is and what the experience has done to them. And I think that this particularly could have used that, because it seems all too easy that they escape from this, hellish situation with seemingly no trauma. The Patrick Wilson's wife, who's been there for a while and seen some stuff, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Like, for her to just kind of walk away makes the threat feel a little less permanent. And I would have loved to have seen her now dealing with like being jumpy or feeling, whatever kind of way.
Yeah.
After this incident, it makes it then feel like there's a permanent scar that's been left for her. And as it is, it just feels like, okay, well, I'm done with that. I'm going to go back home. And I wish it had more weight to it. And same with like Richard Jenkins throwing the rock away. Okay, sure, like I understand what you're telling me, the audience, is that they're all dead, but for him, dude, pick that rock back up. You don't know. You know what I mean? And the fact that he throws it away makes the threat feel less intense. If he held on to it, like he probably did it, but like, I need this, right? Then there's a permanence to the threat. And I feel like this film needed that. And then lastly, the film, at the beginning, you see Patrick Wilson's wife. He says, like, can I do anything for you? She says, yes, read this letter to me. Mm-hmm. And then they get interrupted. He reads it before he goes on the trip, but takes it with him.
Yeah.
And we never see it again. We need that last scene of him reading that to her.
I was afraid that he'd be like reading it to her as he died or something. Like,
right. Yeah.
Something like that.
I knew as soon as he read it in the room for us to hear that we probably weren't going to hear it again.
Right.
Unless there's like more to it, or there's like a spin on it that throughout the course of the film, we now view it differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do wish that they had brought that back into play and said, like, the way that I would have done it is, will you read this for me? Yes. She leaves. Then he takes the letter and puts it in his pocket when he leaves.
Yeah.
But he does not read it for the audience to hear. So that at the end, when she's feeling traumatized by this, he reads it and she is soothed. She's comforted. Again, yeah, maybe there's the thought of like, does that make the woman feel less powerful or whatever? The man reads to her and makes her feel comforted. Sure. But to me, the idea of having the trauma remain and having the, that letter pay off, I think you can dovetail those two storylines together. You don't have to, but you can, but you should come back to the letter and you should feel a sense that the characters have undergone something traumatic.
That's fair.
So for me, I'm like loving the movie, and it's literally that last like 2 minutes of the movie that I'm like, oh, this is almost like perfect. And so anyway, 4 stars for me, but certainly worth your time. And you may very well enjoy that ending more than I did, in which case you'll love the movie.
Yeah. And I wasn't bothered by the ending, but I more just look out for like the rest of the movie is so well executed that even the abrupt ending, I'm just like, oh, well, that's fine. I just sort of,
sure.
Yeah, whatever. That's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do love Bone Tomahawk though. Like I don't know that I'd be like, I'm itching to watch it again.
Sure.
But I'm into it, and it makes me want to watch his other 2 films. I think I saw some of Cell Block 99. I've not seen Dragged Across Concrete. But I'm into it. So
this is one of those movies that even if you don't want to like necessarily watch it again, there is this like urge for me, like I have to show this to somebody.
Yeah.
and like don't tell them anything about it. Just be like, let's watch a Western.
Yeah, this is one of those things I feel like if you or you and I or one of us had seen it and we were in college, we would have told everyone else, like,
we all would have,
hey, we're going to watch Bone Tomahawk. Why? What is it? Just watch.
Just let's watch it.
Yeah.
And I can hear in my mind's eye John going, oh, at that moment. And
I can hear Kellen dry heaving, like, like,
yeah.
Cool. Well, those are two movies there. So awesome. Yay. All right. Well, enjoy that, everybody.
Yep.
Okay. See y'all next time.